Hi folks, FloridaMan here, and today I'm bringing you a very special piece of diplomacy content. We are going to host the very first FloridaMan Forum debate between two diplomacy experts, famous for their skillful play and good looks. I, FloridaMan, will be moderating. We ask you to vote in the comments about who is the winner. The resolution they will be debating is as follows. Online diplomacy is better than face-to-face. For the affirmative, we have, hailing from the depths of the Central Florida swamps, you know him, you may love him, Gator Guy. Yes, my beautiful fans, we are going to make diplomacy greater than it's ever been, because we have seen its true face, and the true form of diplomacy is online, baby. Okay then. Anyway, for the negative, representing the happiest place on earth, Disney World, in a completely non-copyright infringing way, we have Orlando Man. We need to bring this game back to what it was always meant to be. We will embrace the tradition of our forefathers and of the great Allan B. Calhamer himself of in-person diplomacy. Boo! 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 This guy! I wasn't even done with my opening statement. Gentlemen, please control yourselves. There will be plenty of time for that later. Gator Guy, you chose the affirmative, so we will let you go first. You have to argue why online diplomacy is better than face-to-face. You have 8 minutes. Begin! Ladies and gentlemen, let's be real. We know this channel's YouTube statistics. Mostly gentlemen. I have 7 major points, but surprisingly, despite that, I will be brief. It'll feel like no time passed at all. Let's begin with the obvious. Practicality. It's very difficult to get 7 people, 7 in a house together at one time to play. If you want to have any diplomacy hobby at all outside of tournaments, and you don't live near the Windy City Weasels or the Potomac Tea and Knife Society, you have no good option besides online diplomacy. I think the fact that online diplomacy is basically your only decent option is a powerful factor in its favor. Second major point, the growth of this hobby. I can be brief about this. Online diplomacy and social media are basically solely responsible for the growth in the hobby over the past decade or two. Reason number 3, better communications. The amazing thing about playing the game of diplomacy online is that you can communicate with more than one person simultaneously or in quick succession without tipping off your ally to possible betrayal. This makes the communication more like real historical diplomacy, in which secret communications are historically the norm rather than something that's virtually impossible to achieve because you're all a bunch of people in the same building who have to be visibly walking off with each other to negotiate. I think it also means that online diplomacy at its best can involve more complex and interesting networks of relationships and communication, and this is a game about relationships and communication. It's in the name. Diplomacy. Time investment. People invest a lot of time in their online games. The communications threads can be really thoughtful and in-depth, and a lot of thought frequently goes into crafting the perfect message to persuade someone. It's an art, and we are artists, and scientists, and magicians. The in-person crowd knows nothing about investing hours of time into a single season. Nothing, I tell you. Variety. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of diplomacy variants, and they're basically only playable online. Sure, you could try to print out a variant map, and you could play that with your friends, but you'd also need to have pieces that would work with that map, as well as using a flimsy piece of paper as a game board. It would probably be too small for people to read it easily, unless you spent some money on a big map that might also be on sturdier paper. There are also variants that you essentially cannot play properly in person, like Versailles. The secrecy element would be completely destroyed by playing in person, and Fog of War would also be difficult to play in person. Basically, you either need extra people to serve as adjudicators or perform other functions, or you have to accept a compromised version of these games. Sounds like pure trash to me. Next reason, I don't know what number we're on, but next reason, hygiene. Hypothetically speaking, if you don't like to shower or shave when you get into playing a game of diplomacy, it's a lot more acceptable to behave that way in an online game than in an in-person game. It's also less likely to bother you if other people you're playing with aren't bathing. If you're playing with them online, who cares? I feel I should add here, completely unrelated to the above, of course, that diplomacy is a mostly male hobby. Who wants to be stuck in a room all day with a bunch of sweaty guys? And my final reason, I told you it would rush by my argument. Anyway, my final reason, scoring systems. It's a major asset if you are a hyper-competitive person, like virtually all diplomacy players I've ever met. Then some of the better diplomacy sites have scoring systems. Most notably, playdiplomacy.com. Human beings are naturally hierarchical. See Dr. Jordan Peterson for more information. In in-person diplomacy, how do you even keep score? At the house games I've been to, people are always holding something back, not going for the solo win, because they want to preserve the relationship for next week. Ew, how lame. So in conclusion, play the superior version of this game. Go online. Make diplomacy the best that it can be. Thank you, Gator Guy. A very interesting argument from the gentleman from the swamp. Without further ado, let's pass the mic to our friend from Disney in a totally non-copyright infringing way, Orlando Man. Thanks, Douglas. Let me just say, now that I hopefully won't be interrupted any further, how happy I am to be here. It's such an honor, truly. I've been a fan of this YouTube channel since I was in secondary school. Well, with that out of the way, let's demolish this gentleman's points. Gator Guy was courteous enough to actually outline the points of his argument before we started. The only courtesy that he's shown me so far in this debate, so I'll just demolish them one at a time. Yes, I'll admit, it's hard to get 7 people in a house to play a game of diplomacy. No one denied that. No one denied it. But the fact that something is difficult is not a reason not to do it. To quote the late, great John F. Kennedy, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too." What the heck was that accent? Come on, am I right? What, is he trying to do Boston? Shut up, Gator Guy! Gentlemen, please control yourselves. Oh, I hate him so much! Anyway, picking up where I left off, the same is true about getting people together to play in-person games of diplomacy. Practicality is not an argument for why online diplomacy would be better than in-person diplomacy. It's an argument for why it's easier. But we are diplomacy players. We don't do the easy thing. We play the game that ruins friendships and makes us want to tear our hair out and howl at the moon. The next argument that my distinguished opponent made was that online diplomacy is responsible for the growth of the hobby in recent years. I guess that consequentialist argument has a kernel of truth to it, but I personally learned the game on a physical board before I ever tried online, before I ever set sight on any of these websites. Most of the more distinguished players in the hobby still, like David Hood, like Eddie Burson, like Chris Martin, learned the game on a physical board. I'm not sure they even know online diplomacy exists. So if we're going to make the consequentialist argument, I would just say that the physical board game is the shoulder on which you're standing, to feel like you're so high up. The physical game built this hobby, not your stinking websites. There have been world diplomacy championships since the internet was military only. Then, Gator Guy tried to argue that communication in online diplomacy is better. Yes, he argued that with a straight face. Now, that's a completely subjective argument. It really just depends on what you like. Now, me? I like to play in person. I can put my arm around the other fella, get in close with him, put my hand around his neck, look him in the eye, and really communicate. Whereas Gator Guy, he likes to hide behind a keyboard. I don't know, because he's not that confident in his physical charisma. As for his next argument, it was time investment. I think that's an argument against him, actually. You can waste weeks on a game online, then get eliminated in 1903, and you're still waiting for the other people to finish weeks later. Whereas, you could spend an intense, high-octane day with fellow players locked in a single building and come out with their scalps at the end of it. I think I know what I would do. Do you? Now, as for variety, that's a garbage argument, and I'm not going to waste much time on it. Real diplomacy players don't play variants, they play classical. Variants are not the way the game was meant to be played. Classical map all the way, am I right? You know I am. As for hygiene, I think that's a self-defeating argument. I think that's an argument against online, truthfully. I think Gator Guy just threw that in there so he'd have an excuse to wear a bathrobe to this debate, and to not shave his whiskers. Listen, Gator Guy, just because you want to relive your college years, that's no excuse to go around looking like you lost your room key on the way to the laundry room, and you need someone to let you back in. I personally would rather play in person, where you know that people will have to at least dress themselves and shower before they show up. Be their best selves, unlike Gator Guy. I feel like I have to go and shower after this call just from being next to him. As for scoring systems, we know that all the best tournaments, and therefore the only rankings that really count in diplomacy, are in person. There we go. A very straightforward counter to every argument that Gator Guy had. I also have one extra argument for face-to-face diplomacy. The internet. That's right, the internet. The internet makes face-to-face diplomacy games all the better. It makes them easier to organize over websites like Meetup or Facebook groups. It makes it easier to keep track of the score and rating you have in face-to-face diplomacy tournaments. Again, the best tournaments. And the internet makes it easier for you to order your physical board game, which is all you need. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed these arguments. Thank you both for those very interesting arguments. Now we will take a question from the audience. Yes, you in the baseball cap there. Please go ahead. I have a question for FloridaMan. Gosh, I'm such a big fan. Oh, I love the way you play diplomacy while riding roller coasters, even though you're using a physical board. That's so impressive. Your arms must be so strong. It's all in the wrist, kid. Now, what's your actual question? Oh, right. My question is, how do you feel about play-by-email and play-by-post? Inferior adaptations. That's how I feel. Play-by-post was good back when it was really hard to coordinate large groups of people, or in other words, back before the internet. Play-by-email has nothing going for it except that it's faster than playing by post. There's nothing to compare with being in a room with your enemy, smelling his fear, tasting it. Nothing. Okay then. Anything from you on this question, Gator Guy? Hey, he didn't ask me. Why would I have anything to say? Fair enough. We'll take one more audience question. Yes, you there, the one in the hoodie.
Hello, I have a question for Gator Guy. Don't you think that online diplomacy is problematic because it doesn't encourage people to be hygienic or wear clothes?
Young man, I'm only wearing a bathrobe right now because FloridaMan said I had to cam up to participate in this debate. I play diplomacy in my underwear, like God intended it. If he hadn't wanted it to be this way, why did he invent the internet? Answer me that. You can't. Checkmate. Okay then. About the same quality as the rest of this debate. Anything from FloridaMan on this question? I mean, this is frankly the same crazy nonsense we've been getting from Gator Guy this entire time. I don't know how he thinks anyone could vote to call him a winner in this debate when he's wearing a bathrobe. I'm sorry. I should have been more specific. Anything on the question or rebutting what Gator Guy said. Oh, now I've forgotten what Gator Guy said. I'm tired of this. I'm ready to be done now. Let's go home. Okay, time for final statements. We will reverse the earlier order, so that means FloridaMan, you go first. Alright, well, I thought about it, and I've come up with a couple of additional arguments, as if you needed more. Aren't you tired of playing diplomacy by email, or Discord, or whatever websites you use, and also having to keep track of all those different places, and check them every day? There are so many to keep track of. And the artificial intelligence, it's coming for you on these websites. In person will save you. In person is good. In person is right. Vote no on the resolution in the comments below, and give your reasons why to convince any naysayers, or in this case, any yay-sayers, who might otherwise disagree. Well, FloridaMan was wrong about everything that he said. I think that's not hard to figure out. I mean, online has everything we need. It's how pretty much everyone watching this video probably plays diplomacy. It's how we do pretty much everything. It's how we order pizza. I have the people with me, the numbers. So vote yes on the resolution in the comments below. You don't even need to give a reason why. I know we're right. You know we're right. Man, this was a terrible idea. What was I thinking? Oh, what was that? I'm on camera. Oh my gosh, thank you both so much for coming. Please vote in the comments, and we'll announce who won in a community post later to boost the channel and the algorithm. I mean, to resolve this question of a great importance to the diplomacy fandom once and for all. I hope you've enjoyed this absolutely ridiculous diplomacy video. If you did, you should really consider joining my Patreon. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it, but now I average a new piece of content on there every 3 days or so, which is more than twice as much as you get on YouTube. Patrons have early access to every YouTube video before it comes to YouTube, and you should consider getting in on that action. Our thanks go out to all those names on screen, all of my wonderful patrons. Till next time, FloridaMan out.